Hello and welcome to today's edition of Friday Fraud Review, proudly presented by A.M. Simpkins and Associates as a free resource to stay up to date on the latest trends in higher education cyber fraud, as well as the technologies that are being developed to protect institutions and the students they serve all across the country. AMSA founder Maurice Simpkins will be your host, sharing real-life experience, insights from clients, partners, and thought leaders as we continue our mission to rescue higher education from the onslaught of cybercrime and identity theft.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Friday Fraud Review. I am your host, Maurice Simpkins, and as you know, we're here to talk all things fraud as it pertains to the world of higher education. Today's episode is brought to you, of course, by the AMSA S.A.F.E product, number one in protecting and providing data and fraud prevention and protection in the world of higher education. Today's episode is going to be one for the ages, as we're going to have our first guest joining us here on the Friday Fraud Review. We're going to bring in a guest from a community college infrastructure, someone who has had the real world experience, should I say, on the grounds with these fraudsters. And as we get into today's episode, you're going to get to hear some of the insights, some of the stories, and really some of the struggles that your everyday institution, be it community college, be it four-year institution, are grappling with under the pressures of all of the fraudulent type of information and activity that is going on currently. So thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with the next part of our show.
From my perspective as a community college admissions person, what I've seen over the holiday season is this is when we first detected and realized there was fraud. There was fraud in our systems we were having some issues. One of the stories that I like to tell is we were coming back from a holiday break where the college had been closed for 2 weeks. Come back from the holidays and we're getting ready to do our pre-spring semester meetings. We're doing analysis, and all of a sudden, at that point I was director of admissions at the college, and get queued up to give a big presentation because we were up 57% in our new student admissions and enrollment. So, but again, like we were celebrating this 57% because we had done so much work to remove barriers for students, to make self-service more accessible and attainable. Try to allow a student without ever talking or interacting with a person to go straight from application to admission to enrollment within the same day or even within minutes. And so we've been working for years to implement that vision. And so we see that 57%, we thought that was proof that what we have been doing was working. And so I have that 57%, and I'm getting ready to do my presentation, my big presentation from the campus
Campaigns
community.
Popping.
Oh, exactly. Oh, this is what I'm ready for. I have all the thanks and the high fives and the congratulations ready. And I decided, you know what? Let me just update those numbers. So when I tell this story, I have the real numbers, And so I reran the numbers, and right before I head to this big campus-wide meeting, and all of a sudden, the 57% was like 127% in 3 days' time.
What?
And so that's when I went from getting ready to celebrate. In 30 seconds, I went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows.
Wow.
Because you talk about a moment when you realize something is too good to be true. And at that time, we knew identity fraud was out there, but that was a problem in California, right? That's a problem that you hear about in other colleges. It isn't impacting us. But in that one moment, I knew absolutely they found my college. And that was what we were coming back from the holidays. And actually, there's so many things that because what we determined is these fraudsters, they know our schedules. They know when we're unavailable, and then when they have free range to our system. So I'm meeting with our BPs today and talking about how when we get back, we should expect that while we are away, that the nefarious, the bad actors, are aware of that. So, which is why we have the systems, tools, and things in place, that we're here to talk about.
Yeah, and Ron, I guess what I'd be interested is, so you have this moment of jubilation and then you realize that things don't seem as they seem. Literally, what was the remediation plan? Was it all hands on deck, then reviewing every application? Like, what were the immediate impact and next steps on that?
Yeah, exactly. And so great question, Tyler. So in the spirit of, again, removing barriers, full automation, self-service, our systems have been set up as a no-touch process. And all of a sudden, and so we weren't staffed for the high touch. We weren't staffed for review. The system ran on autopilot, and all of a sudden, in a minute, we had to switch from not looking at an application. We assisted the student, but it's more advising capacity. We went from not looking to having to review every application that came in. We weren't staffed for it. We didn't have the tools for it, the workflows, the operations, and that happened within a week. We had to stand this up, and so the challenge came is we had to move people away from helping students to moving into just processing, and we don't know what we're looking for at this time. It's all needle in the haystack, except what ultimately to come, it wasn't even a needle in a haystack. We were trying to pick the hay out of a stack of needles, right? And one is a lot more painful than the other. And so that's kind of it, and it happened overnight. We had to shift resource, shift focus, and all we were doing is we were essentially downloading spreadsheets and looking at tens of thousands of records, and all the fields of data that we're pulling in, and just trying to make sense of it, without the tools, systems, or the knowledge or skills, to be able to do it effectively on our own.
As a group, how were you coordinating like patterns that you were finding in real time? Was there a spreadsheet outside of a spreadsheet, outside of a chat? Like, how did you, as a group, sort of use all the knowledge you're learning in patterns?
Yeah. So so you nailed it on the head. It's patterns. It was pattern recognition, and at first we didn't know what we were looking for. Yeah. But we take data and we're pivoting, splicing, filtering, and just hoping that an insight will come to us. And usually the way it works is we don't know what we're looking for. We just have huge data sets and just eyes, that we know. We don't know what fraud data looks like, but at least we know what our student information looks like. We know our students. So we look for any inconsistencies with student information. And sometimes it was, I miss the good old days when the fraudsters weren't very sophisticated, because we could, they weren't as hard to identify. Because what would happen is you'd figure out one pattern. You wouldn't know what you're looking for, but all of a sudden you'd find a pattern. You're like, oh my God, I found one. And then you kind of reverse engineer the system to find other students that look like this known fraud student. And then when you do that, you're like, oh my gosh, there's 5, there's 10, there's 300. And they're all in our systems, full access and everything. And we're trying to pull them back out. And we get that, and then we just start looking for the next pattern. So it was painful, like I said. And we actually, I'm going to say, like, we got pretty good at it, but that's, finger quotes, I'm finger quoting pretty good. We got pretty efficient at identifying pockets of fraud. And we thought that we were in good shape. And we ran for a year like this, by the way, just kind of pulling in resources, doing our best. It was after the next holidays. We came back in January, and all of a sudden we just we start running the numbers, knowing, okay, so we'll see what happens when we get back. And another heart sank moment, realizing that, and this went from fraud applications, now we're on fraud registrations. And we start seeing registration patterns that don't align with what we're looking for, and so this is where, like, I guess we are not as good as what we thought we were. And
wow,
and which in reality, guys, is what led us to AMSA and S.A.F.E. That was the realization that we cannot do this alone. We do not have the systems, expertise, or tools or data sets, to compare, because the only data sets we have are the data that the figure quote student provided to them, and nothing to compare it against.
And even if so, your administrators and your admissions and enrollment folks, they aren't here for that. They're here to help. They're here to grow and allow more students to come into the institution. They are now having to pivot and question the likelihood of a student saying, or the student being real or not. I mean, as a person who has worked in pretty much higher education as their whole professional career, I'm passionate about the student, making sure the student has access, equal equity and access and things like that. And I'm like, wow, the effect on the students, like, I'm pretty sure you had capacity problems or, things like that, but how are the students affected when things like this happen? Are we able to go back and say, hey, you can come into this class, or are they like coming to the next semester? Typically when things like that happen, what do we do with the, students who would have filled those seats?
Yeah. And again, great points all the way around. So one, we talk about we started with the staff side, that our staff, we want our staff that are working with students to be enthusiastic, engaged, and supportive in every way, and not in the back of their mind wondering, is this person I'm talking to on the phone, is this person that I'm emailing or virtual with, are they real or not? That's not what we want. That's not what where their headspace needs to be. So in our case, we tried to leave those people, those student-facing people, out of this, to the extent that we could. And so administrators, people like me, we took the brunt of this on ourselves. We bore the burden, if you will, of doing that. But unfortunately, you can't shield people from it. We told our student-facing people is assume everyone you're talking to is the real person. Don't go into it. Let us worry about whether whether they're real or not. You just assist the person you're in front of. But in reality, even with that mindset, there was an impact, because so what we got into, like I said, we come back from this break, we realized that in our case, 1 in every 12 seats, 1 in every 12 new enrollments was a fraud enrollment. These students are taking full-time, 1 in 12. They're taking full-time classes, full-time loads, and taking all the seats from traditionally our first year seats, our open enrollment seats, our Englishes, our math, English, math, humanities classes. And so our people were trying to help the real students trying to get into classes that don't exist anymore, or seats that aren't available. So in order to pivot, again, not knowing the magnitude and scope, we didn't know 1 in 12 at the time. All we know is, man, it doesn't feel right, but I can't tell who's who. And so we're just opening new sections, trying to hire new faculty, and adding cost. And ultimately, when the semester started, we did everything we could to create a seat for everyone who asked for one. But a lot of the seats that were filled ended up being taken by ghost students.
So talk to me a little bit about the impact that reality had on the administrators who were responsible for figuring out how many sections they needed to build out. And what's the point? I guess it's probably two questions I'm asking. At what point did the phantom students drop out?
So things have changed over time. So give just from a that first holiday was the 21 to 22 holiday. Then we're coming 22 20 to 23 holiday, which, by the way, when we ended up hooking up with you guys, was after that realization. But at that time, we were just seeing non-attendance. So non-enrollment, non-attendance, by and large, they were enrolling in online courses, online sections, not exclusively, but they were, our Go students were registering in those, and ended up being students that never logged in, or if they were in person, just never showed. Okay. I do know a lot of colleges that have had a bigger problem with the Go students activating an account, doing, using AI to submit, in particular, some of the early assignments so they don't get removed for non-attendance. That's not what we were seeing on our case, but it was still, it had financial implications, it had morale implications, it had access and availability, to the students we're trying to serve implications, which is, again, what led us to the realization this is bigger than us. We can't do that. We can't do this alone. We've got smart people that are highly capable of doing things, working with our technology folks, our data folks, our admissions and records folks to try to come up with something. But we want those people working on their jobs.
Well, sure. And with the kinds of numbers you're talking about, like 1 in 12, it's almost 10% of the cohort that you're talking about being completely imaginary.
Yeah, and we did our best to try to get them out as fast as we could. Sure. And in some cases, we come back from break, we realize this is a problem. We have that, oh my gosh, moment. And we're trying to get them out. We got 2 weeks until classes start. And we're trying to free up as many seats as we can to get them out. Unfortunately, it wasn't until grades were due that we realized, we got hundreds out, by the way. We cleared hundreds of fake students out. But we did end up with a number of them that later on we determined that we did not catch.
What's interesting, Ron, is a lot of the institutions when recent, I have conversations, is there's a concern that this sort of detective work and applications will lead to like staff attrition, somebody that's kind of wits end saying, I'm done, I got into higher ed to help students, now I'm detective, I quit, I'm out. Did you have any impact on staff morale? Do you feel like anybody kind of pushed them out of even higher ed because they got sick of doing this sort of detective work?
No, so you make a good point on detective stories. Now, and I have heard of instances of that. In our case, and I've heard plenty of stories, of horror stories of just how people had to redeploy staff. And that's not who we hired. We didn't hire those people for those jobs. We are, people for, we hired admissions people. We are advising people, that have the knowledge, engagement, not people that should be combing through spreadsheets, and trying to sleuth people online. In our case, we tried to not put that on the student-facing staff. So it was me and a couple of other people that were just burning the hours to try to get this done. And we created workflows and lookups and things to be able to try to automate it the best we could. But ultimately, it's not what I got into higher ed for either, to tell you the truth. But yeah, those are real stories that you bring up. Fortunately, at my institution, we were extremely conscientious of that. And we did realize that we assumed some additional risk, but we also realized bringing those people in brought risk as well.
I thank you for joining us today, Ron. This has been so insightful for us. And I'm pretty sure that there'll be some of our viewers and listeners that are just mind blown, like head rolling off their shoulders when they start to understand the concerted effort, the organized effort, just how comfortable, coming into a Zoom room, not as the person I'm saying I am, I got to have a level of comfort or, gall that just not everybody, has. But if I'm a person in higher education, I'm not thinking it takes all of that. I'm thinking this person in front of me is going to be legitimate, and I can move them forward, not thinking that, they're trying to implicate me and them getting across into some kind of fraudulent, malicious activity. Ron, this will be a episode that is talked about for a very, very long time. I am sitting here, my palms are sweating, and I'm just saying to myself, the audacity of these folks, the boldness of it, coming after our higher education institutional friends and colleagues, it really burns me up. But at the same time, I sit there and I say, we've got to do more. We've got to get in front of more institutions. We've got to get more institutions to understand that this is what they're dealing with. I spoke with an institution recently, and they said, they had some things where the S.A.F.E platform had flagged different phone numbers and such. And we've seen instances where the fraudsters will take phone numbers that were, disconnected or recently put out of service and get those numbers reconnected. Why? So that they can use them for different fraud. It's almost like the scam we were seeing with the 10-minute email thing forever that was going on. And so they're going to forever be evolving in their ways. And we thank, you for your insight on what you're being able to see on that evolution. And so this has been just truly insightful and great for me. Eric, Ron, I don't know if you guys have anything else in there, but I'm sitting here now ready to be like, oh my goodness, how can we get ahead of this? How can we get ahead of this? Understanding everything we know now, how can we continue to move ahead? Because the S.A.F.E platform can't sleep. We're going to have to sleep, but the S.A.F.E platform can't sleep if it's going to be able to combat these levels of fraud and be efficient at it. I mean, this is sophisticated level operations here.
Yep.
So
thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Hopefully, listeners will be inspired or find some insight from this. I'm telling you what, I never imagined I would ever see the back end of the organized crime piece of this of identity theft like I did the other day. And just thank goodness we had someone with the place of mind to be able to grab that screenshot when it was up for an instant and then call for backup.
For sure.
Yeah, that's something, Ron, that I think is going to be a pivoting moment in higher education. The fact that we can now say without a shadow of a doubt, we know this is organized, we know this is concerted, and we know that it's internationally connected. It rises the antennas a little higher so that sooner or later we're going to get on the right person's radar, that they'll come in and really give some support, across the nation for the institutions that are grappling and fighting with the fraud today. So thank you so much for your insight, Ron. This has been an amazing day. Eric, thank you again. For those of you viewers who may not know, I can take this moment and truly, geek out because Ron on one side was one of our first clients to come aboard the platform, and he immediately started giving us feedback and input on things that he would love to see in the platform. And Eric was already doing the same thing. Eric, we would push out new features. Eric would say, I like this, but for higher education to understand it, it needs a little of this, it needs a little of that. And then Ron would add the same thing in. And that's the true essence of what the S.A.F.E platform is today and what we wanted it to be. We don't want to answer to the fraudsters. We answer to our higher education clients so that the fraudsters stay away. And that's what we're here and we're about here at the S.A.F.E platform. And so we thank you all for joining us today. Friday Fraud Review. It has been a doozy hearing some of the craziness about what these fraudsters do. But thank you all for staying with us for the entire time. But it's been worth it. It has been worth it. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week on the Friday Fraud Review. I'm Maurice, my guests Eric and Ron. Tyler had to slide out a little earlier, and Bob did as well. So we thank you all, and we'll see you next time on the Friday Fraud Review.